Well, howdy there, dentistry people. This is James Harvey, class of 2026, coming to you live from the D1 Lab and Sim Clinic at the behest of the legendary Dr. James E. Newman Jr., who I'm sure you all will be getting to know in the most excellent form this year. And what I'm going to be doing for you today is just a little waxing tips, tricks, and a maxillary central incisor tutorial video. So to start off with, let's think about how do you want to hold your waxer. Now, you've got two different waxing tips at your disposal. You got the big one and you got the small one. And they're both extremely useful, but they're both very useful for different things. I'm gonna show you when and how you're gonna want to use them. But before we get to any of that, before we get to actually thinking about applying wax to a nice little prep here, how do you actually hold your waxing tip? Now, I know a lot of people of my generation, of my age, learned to, or well, I should say, did not learn how to hold a pen and or pencil properly. Instead, they like to do this sort of claw grip thing, which is neither very stable nor very ergonomically good for the longevity of your hands. Both of which are things that you're going to actually want as a dentist. So what you're going to want to do is hold it with this sort of pen or pencil grip on the nice little cork here. And what that'll do is that'll give you excellent rotation. You can see I can pretty much rotate this almost 360 degrees around. Gives you lots of very fine control of where you're putting things. And once you actually have that sort of idea down of like, okay, how do I hold this properly? Let's then think about how do I balance myself? Because if there's one thing that's important as a dentist, especially as you start working in real people's mouths, is going to be stability of your hand. Because you can't be making a filling prep if you got a jittery hand. You can't be cutting a crown prep if your hand's just wobbling all over the place. So you're always going to want to have a point of contact somewhere. And you can see right now I have my ring finger balanced on the, well, it's between the first and second molars, 2 and 3 here on my little dentiform. And that gives me the ability to have really fine, stable control of exactly where my tip of the waxer is. Now, something that you're going to notice as you're starting to wax is, you're going to want to be able to actually take your tooth prep out of the dentiform, because it's a little hard to do certain details if it's just stuck in there. So you're probably thinking, how am I supposed to stabilize my hand now? How am I supposed to actually make sure that I'm putting wax where I want? Well, one thing that you can do is actually rest your hand against the table. That's perfectly valid as long as you got both hands rested. That's fine. Or alternatively, if you're trying to do things a little bit closer to you, you can put a finger rest on another finger. It's not particularly difficult, and it gives you the same effect. So if you need to save your back while you're trying to get down and look really close at it and check out all those fine little details, then that's a perfectly good thing to do too. It's just something you're always going to want to kind of keep in mind as you're waxing or drilling or honestly doing anything, even in a fake mouth. All right, so now that we've got some sort of very basic things understood there, the first thing that you're going to want to do when you're actually starting to get wax to apply it to your tooth is thinking about, okay, how am I going to transfer the wax from a little wax block or cube or puck, whatever they end up giving you, actually to the prep. And it's sometimes, it's not as easy as it sounds, especially for beginners, because what you're going to want to do is people instinctively will say like, okay, I want to get this big melty pool so I can transfer a lot. And honestly, the shorter the amount of time that you're spending on the block of wax, the bigger the blob of wax you're going to actually be able to transfer. You can see that's a nice big dollop. Whereas if I'm just sort of creating this little soup here, really it's not actually going to transfer very much. And so you'll see a lot of people sort of struggling early on when they're thinking about, oh man, I'm supposed to make this whole, I'm supposed to make a whole tooth. I'm supposed to coat the prep and make my coping, which a coping is what we call the sort of initial wax covering, where you just get the whole thing sort of covered in a nice little layer, and you can start sort of building on it from there. And just knowing, okay, you can apply just a very short amount of time on your wax block, just not even a second barely, and it'll get you a nice big dollop that you can pop right on. And also be cognizant as you're sort of turning it to put more wax on. On occasion, if the wax doesn't dry up or set up fast enough, it will kind of run a little bit and create little pools and hills and just little blobs of wax that you weren't actually intending to put in specific places. So just be careful of that sort of thing as you're going along. Now, as we build our little coping up here, you can start to think about, okay, this doesn't really look like a tooth much. So how are we going to get from this to this? And it's honestly a lot simpler than you might expect, but it takes patience. It takes a willingness to mess up and undo seemingly the hard work that you've done sometimes, and just be willing to have a very critical eye and be willing to be a perfectionist. So once you've got your little coping, you can pop it into the dentiform here, and you can start to apply little dollops of wax into the interproximal spaces. Now, I don't know how much dental anatomy you guys will have had by this point, but now's probably a good time to at least review, because a lot of you are completely new to this. So when we're looking at the surfaces of teeth, you can see how do they relate to each other, what structures are they facing, and you're gonna need to know what all these surfaces are called, what all the different sort of anatomical structures are called. So when you see where I'm placing these little dollops of wax, these are what we call interproximal spaces, because they're between the teeth. They're proximal to these two different teeth. And when you look at, so this is the midline of the mouth right here. So the side of the tooth that is facing the midline is the mesial surface, the mesial. So you can just remember mesial, midline, and then the opposite side is called the distal surface. I like to think of it, at least when I was first learning it, as distal distant. It is distant from the midline. It's facing away from the midline. Now the surface that's pointing out at you, right here, That actually has 3 different names, because why wouldn't it have 3 different names? But some of them are more common than others. So the first one, and the one that you can very easily use, is just the facial surface. Pretty easy to remember because it's pointing out like your face. Alternatively, it can be called the labial surface because it is pointing towards the lips, seeing as it is one of your anterior teeth here. And then it also technically can be called the buccal surface. Although when we get into labial versus buccal, labial is pointing towards the lips, buccal is pointing towards the cheeks. So, while they both technically mean the same thing, if we're being very specific, buccal tends to refer to your posterior teeth, so your premolars, molars, that surface on them, whereas labial is more for your anterior teeth. But facial works pretty universally. And then if we flip this around, this is very easy. This is the lingual surface, because lingual, if you speak Spanish, you can think lengua, towards your tongue, or French, la langue, the tongue. So there's that. That's fairly simple. And then when we're thinking vertically, so this surface up here versus this surface, or this, I suppose, dimension down here, you have the incisal edge, because these are your incisors. They cut. It's the incising edge. And this is, you can either call sort of the cervical end of the crown or the gingival end, either way. Cervical because it is the cervix of the crown of the tooth, and gingival because it is proximal to the gingiva, towards your gums. All right, so with that sort of fun vocabulary time dealt with, I'm going to continue applying wax to the mesial interproximal space and to the distal interproximal space until we have this nice little T-shaped guy going on here. Somebody's just hanging out between number 9 and number 7 here. And what that's going to do, well, first of all, flip it over, shake it around. That's not going to come out unless you want it to. So you've created yourself a nice little stable platform while you can kind of assess where to go from here. And what I like to do, and again, I just want to make it clear that the techniques that I'm showing you here are the things that work best for me. You may find that they work for you. You may find that some of them don't necessarily work the best for you. Let's get that guy out of there. But feel free to play around with them, use or don't use them as you see fit, because what fundamentally matters at the end of the day is whether or not you can create a nice, beautiful, anatomically correct tooth. If you can do that in a way completely different than me, go for it. But what I like to do from here is I like to start building up the incisal edge here. And to do that, I just take a little bit of wax at a time, and I just kind of flow it across the teeth. Just a little bit at a time. And it can look like it's kind of bubbling sometimes, but every once in a while, you're gonna want to, actually fairly consistently. I say every once in a while, but every once in a while is a pretty frequent measurement when it comes to assessing your wax ups, because you're gonna want to look at it from different angles and just be seeing, okay, how well does this fit within the arch of the teeth? Because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to mirror number 9, right? You're trying to create a perfect little mirror image tooth, because that's what ideal teeth are. You have your mirror images here, and this is how you'd be looking at it in somebody's mouth, right? So this is their right side, this is their left side, this is their right central maxillary incisor. And because this is perfectly ideal anatomy, you're just going to want to make sure that you're trying to match this guy here. So part of that involves, how do these little, how do the curvatures at the point angles of the incisal edge look? The mesial of these central incisors is a little bit sharper than the distal. You can see the distal is a little bit more round. And as we keep building this up, we're going to want to pay attention to that sort of thing. So let's keep going here. Flying wax. And once we get to a point where we think we've got enough wax, you can kind of do is you can let it cool for a second, and then I just had to come on it there for a second. And once it's starting to get cool, you can tell when the shine starts to go away from the wax. It's starting to get cool. I like to flip it over and just press down very gently. And what that'll do is that'll give us a nice flat surface that shows us, okay, all right, that's at a good angle, that's at a good level with number 9 besides it. Those are both at a level with each other. And so that can be a very useful technique for just kind of maintaining that edge height. Now, once you've got that where you want it, I like to start adding a little bit of mass to the facial surface. It's not. You can do this in a different order if you want, but that's kind of what I like to do. Start building up a little bit of mass, start getting a little bit of the shape. And so in order to start bulking out the shape, I start adding a little bit more wax into those inner proximals. So start getting some of that curvature of that line angle. And a line angle is the line that's formed between the intersection of two surfaces. So the line between the facial surface and the mesial surface of the tooth. This is the mesiofacial line angle right here, or at least it's going to be. And we can just keep kind of flowing that in there. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect at this particular juncture in time. And we're going to do the same thing on the distal. So right here, just flow a little bit in. And if you're noticing, I've got these proximal contacts between these teeth are very thick right now, and they will not be that thick by the time we're done with it. But that's just that's okay for now. That's okay for now. We don't need to be overly concerned with that. And I'm still using the big waxing tip right now. But for a lot of this, you can switch over to the small waxing tip. The small waxing tip will give you much more fine control, but as long as I'm actually trying to sort of bulk apply wax onto the tooth, I like to stick with the big waxing tip because it just allows you to get it all on there faster. And as you can probably imagine, if I wasn't narrating this right now, the process could go a little bit quicker. So you guys are going to be totally fine. It's not going to take as long as you think. It might take a while at first as you're starting to get used to things, but you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So I'm just kind of smoothing out the facial surface a little bit here. And just gonna let that rest for a second while it sort of sets up. When you're actually in the lab, you can potentially use the air nozzle, or even blow on it a little bit to get it to harden quicker if you're in a pinch. But just be careful that if you use the air nozzle, you don't blow away all the wax if it's still in its liquid form, because that will happen. Now that I've got kind of a nice sort of semblance of a tooth shape and structure from the facial, I'm gonna swing over to the lingual, and I'm gonna do a little bit of filling back here as well too. Just gonna pop a nice little dollop there, and a nice little dollop there. And this is sort of starting to give us the structural foundation. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. I'm just popping a little bit of my wax here and here. And we're just going to give ourselves a little bit of the structural foundation for our marginal ridges, which you can see here on number 9. It's these little elevated structures to either side. And those are going to border our lingual fossa, which is this little scooped out area that gives the maxillary central incisors their sort of shovel-like shape. So now that I've got that sort of filled in a little bit, I'm just going to do a little smoothing. I'm gonna just kind of get rid of some of the little blobs and imperfections on the back here. And that'll just make some of our work a little bit easier later. Okay. So now that we've got that, I'm actually going to take our number 8 out of the dentiform again. And to do that, I'm going to take my, well, you can use one of a few of the tools at your disposal. This is the UW1. It's a nice sort of blunt instrument. But you can also use your PK Thomas, which is a little bit smaller and sharper. Either one works. I like the PK Thomas for doing occlusal details on posterior teeth, but this is really all I use it for. On the anteriors is just inserting it in here, and it should pop out. There we go. Sometimes it may take a little bit. Just be patient. Don't have to force it. Just clean this up real quick. So now you can see that you know, we've got the reasonable beginnings of our facial outline here. You know, not a terrible beginning for our lingual surface, but our mesial and distal, you know, they're still looking a mite poorly. So at this point, I'm going to take the small waxing tip, because I'm not going to be needing quite as much material, and I'm just going to flow it into these sort of interproximal surfaces. And I'm just going to take a small waxing tip. I'm going to get rid of some of these little chunky sticky outy bits kind of form up there. That'll just help make it, you know, that's a much nicer interproximal surface. I know I would want the interproximal surfaces of my teeth to look like that rather than that. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Shouldn't take long. Yeah, there you go. And if you develop a sort of a little mound or bubble of wax, just kind of drag it around. You can use this like a pen. Don't be too aggressive, but just drag it around, paint it around, and Surface will be getting smoother in no time. So now that we've got that smoothed out, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to pop it back into the tooth, and I'm going to reassess. All right, so what have we done? Well, I can already see that we've gotten rid of a little too much of our distal proximal area there. So we're going to want to build that back up as we go forward. And on the mesial, honestly, we probably haven't gotten rid of quite enough material, because when you have your interproximal contacts, you know, they're not very big. You don't want them to be tiny, because you know, on a real patient, if you have a really small or even non-existent interproximal contact, well, that's just a recipe for food impaction. And you know, if you get a bunch of food stuck down in here, well, that's Carystown, USA, population U at that point. So yeah, so as we're going forward, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take down the mesial side just a little bit using some of my favorite tools, and I'm going to build up the distal just a little bit, just to kind of get us back to where we want to be. So as I go at the mesial surface, I'm going to take my very favorite tool in the whole wide world, the half Hollenbeck, which has this lovely side and this lovely side. They're very similar, just at different angles. And you can use them both to great effect, but I like this side the best. And what you can do is just very lightly, you know, put your half Hollenbeck sort of perpendicular to the tooth like that. And, you know, without applying much pressure, you can just start rubbing it around. You'll see it's gonna start, it'll start just flaking off little bits of wax and smoothing it out. You just move very gently, very, very gently. We have ourselves a happy little tooth here. So, you know, if you find that you're getting too many little flakes, you can always take your nylon toothbrush and just kind of brush it off like that so you can see. And as I'm looking at it, you know, I'm probably going to need to take it down a little bit more. But honestly, the more concerning thing that I'm looking at right now, and what we're going to want to take care of here, is the fact that, you know, we're not really going to the margins of our finish line of our prep. You know, I've got this little undercut right here. You know, it's clear that our cingulum, which is this sort of bump right here on the lingual surface. You can see that our cingulum is nowhere near prominent enough. We can see the actual finish line right there. So I'm going to need to build that up a little bit more. And I'm still going to need to rebuild up on the distal surface here. So to do that, I'm going to take the small waxing tip again, and I'm just going to plop a little bit on the distal surface. And I'm just going to start drawing it around. Just going to start drawing it around. And that should help out just a little bit. I'll fill in some of those areas where we had taken off a little bit more than we wanted to earlier. It's starting to get a little more filled out. Make sure that we're good on the cervical margin there. All right. And I'm going to do the same thing all the way around. Going to make sure that we're filled out at the cervical finish line on the facial surface. Oh, don't want want to have that spilled over. Now that's sort of what I mean when you know, if you turn it too quickly, some of the wax can kind of flow where you don't want it to. And I'm just going to keep going around, just like that. Won't take too much. It really goes pretty quick. Pretty quick. Alright, let's see. And now, perfect opportunity to fill in our cingulum a little bit. Get a little more mass on there. We don't have to do that right now. There's another step later where you could just as easily do it, but I figure I'll do it right now just so I don't really have to be thinking about it quite as much. Okay, so now we can see, okay, as we've gone, we've made sure that our finish line is, for the most part, nice and filled in. We've noticed that in some places, maybe I've put a little too much. So, you know, say you find yourself in that situation, well, one thing you can do is come back to our trusty friend, the half Hollenbeck. Again, make sure that you're at that angle perpendicular to it, and just hold it right there at the prep line, and just start running it right along. Because the plastic is gonna ensure that you don't take too much wax off, and in fact, it'll ensure that you take just enough wax. And that will leave you with a very clean, a very, very, very clean finish line, which is precisely what you want. So I would just come around here, around the facial. Just brush it off here real quick. And would you look at that? Got a nice clean finish line. We may come back to it before the day is done. In fact, it's not as clean here as I would like it, actually. So I'm just gonna come back again with a little more wax, and I'm just gonna run it right along the finish line. Right along. And as long as you do that, and you're gentle, and you don't try to, fling wax everywhere, it'll be perfectly fine. And it'll fill in those gaps really quickly, because all the liquid wax there will just flow right on into it. And I'm gonna come back with the half Hollenbeck here. And that's looking much better. So at this point, I'm gonna just pop it back in to our dentiform, see how we're doing, and well, now it looks like I'm getting closer on the mesial, but we're a little bit light still, and on the distal we're still very light. So I'm gonna really have to add a little bit more wax there. And when you see all these little imperfections and stuff along the process, that's just par for the course. Part of the process. And don't get discouraged when a tooth isn't looking exactly like the dream tooth that you imagined. It takes time. And honestly, a lot of times our mind's eye is really not the best at helping us, because sometimes we'll think that we want it to look one way. You know, we've got this vision of a tooth in our head, and what we'll forget to do is look at the tooth that mirrors it, because that will tell you exactly what you need to do. You know, make this look like this. Don't make this look like what you think it should look like. Don't make it look like the vision of the tooth in your head. Make it look like the actual tooth that it's supposed to be mirroring. It's a really hard lesson for all artists to learn. And I mean, make no mistake, you know, if you're going into dentistry, you are going to become an artist. That's what we do. We are sculptors. We create tiny little sculptures in people's mouths when we work on them. And that's what you're going to be learning to do here. This is sculpture. You're all artists now. Congratulations. You're going to have fun. It's a good time. So let's check that again. Let's pop it back in. And okay, you know what? Maybe we're a little bit heavy there, but that's, you know, that's looking better. We're not shy by 0.5 millimeter or whatever it just was. So at this juncture, pop it back out, and I'm gonna look at the tooth. And you can see sort of where it's shiny right there. That's where this tooth is contacting number 7, our adjacent tooth there. So we can see that, and we can kind of look at the wax surrounding it and say, yeah, okay, where can that come down a little bit? So let me get this back in focus. So I'm just going to take the half Holland back, and I'm going to just very gently run it around. Run it around. Until we're more or less flush, you know, with that shiny area. It's not really there anymore. And you can look at it there. We're still maybe, our point of contact still maybe a little bit low. So what I might do now is I might add just a little bit towards the incisal edge. And we're gonna need that anyways, because we're gonna need to build up the incisal edge just slightly to make sure that we have enough material to get the shape right that we want. So, again, small waxing tip, because we don't need a lot of material, but we do need very fine control. So, I'm going to place just a teeny dollop right there on the corner. Not much, that's all it takes. I'm just going to make sure that it's well blended in there. That's creating a pretty nice line angle there. And you can even draw the disto-facial line angle. Oh, like that. And you can see it. Just starting to get nice and smooth. And I can see that there's maybe a little bulge in the middle. So I'm just gonna bring it up and down, just drawing and painting with the wax. And in fact, you can see what I've done is I've actually taken it down a little bit too low. And part of that might be just because of well, gravity and the way that I'm having to hold this. But I'm gonna try to draw it back vertically. And you can lean your tooth over just a little bit. Kind of encourage the flow of the wax towards the incisal edge, rather than down towards the gingival or cervical edge, cervical margin. That's starting to look good. You can see, if you look very closely, there's a little bit of a concavity there, and I'll probably want to smooth that out just a little bit. But let's pop it back into our dentiform and see where we're at. That's starting to look pretty nice. I think I am going to take down that little bulge there just a little bit to get our to get a nice little symmetrical interproximal area there. So I'll just take Mr. Half Hollenbeck, very gentle, very gentle. Remember, we want a happy little tooth here. We don't want sad gouged tooth. So just always be gentle as you're going. It'll cause you less heartache too when you don't accidentally chip off a whole chunk of your tooth because you're white knuckling your instruments, which happens. And if it happens, it's not the end of the world. Waxing is very forgiving, but not doing that will likely save you some time. All right, so let me pop this right back into the beniform. We're starting to look pretty good. I'm gonna want to round out our point angle, our distal point angle there a little bit on the incisal edge. But to do that, because as I look at this, I can see that okay, our incisal edge height is not bad compared to number 9 here. But honestly, I could probably add a little bit just to help create a nice straight line rather than straight with a little taper like we got here. So I'm just going to take a nice little dollop of wax and I'm going to plop it towards the corner. And there. And as we're looking here, I can see that really I need to actually move the distobuccal line angle, which should be a little farther out here. If you look symmetrically at where that is, we're a little too far lingual here. So really I need to start moving this facially, which I can do by, guess what, adding more wax. So I'm just going to plop a little dollop right there on the facial surface. And I'm going to plop another one next to it. And another one. And I'm just going to start drawing it down. Just want to make sure that you can actually kind of see this. It's a little bit tricky. I'm going to start drawing it down the line angle. And that'll help you create a nice corner. You can already see that's much more in line with where that line angle of number 9 is. And that's probably going to require us to do a little bit of filling in of the little depression that we've just created on the facial surface. That's okay. Not to worry. Just gonna smooth it out. And when you're doing sort of waxer tip smoothing like this, where you're just kind of drawing around and letting the wax and gravity do its job, I would recommend that you keep your waxing tips at pretty high heat. I would stick probably around the 230 to 250 degree range, which may seem like a lot, but it's actually what I've been using for pretty much all of this process. If you're any cooler than that, temperature wise, it's going to be a lot harder to get all the necessary wax that you need in a timely fashion. So just be aware of that. Now let's look. What do we got here? So we've got a lot of facial bulk. And I may end up drawing some more of it over towards the mesial. But honestly, you can see on the mesial, we're missing a little bit of mass on that line angle too. So we can probably take some of the mass from the central area and just drag it with our waxing tip like this over towards the mesial. And who knows, we may need to add a little bit more mass there still. But that's looking a little bit better. But I think yes, we are going to want to add a little bit of mass there. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did on that distal surface. I know if any of this gets a little bit tedious for you, if you think, oh, okay, I got this, feel free to skim ahead a little bit. That's okay. But I know it can be really important for some folks to see a process in its entirety. I know I definitely like to see how a thing is done in totality before I do it myself. So let's come back here. That's starting to look better. Is it perfectly rounded and smooth? No, not yet. But we've got the right sort of amount of mass, more or less. We may still need to raise this up just a little bit, but we're pretty close. And at this stage, part of what I'm really going to try to do here is do as much shaping of the tooth with my waxing tip as I possibly can. Because you absolutely can just, put on a massive amount of wax and just start carving away later. But it's not very time efficient. And as I'm kind of moseying here, there will be time constraints when you're doing this, and they'll be pretty lenient at first, but you'll get faster just as the projects get more complex, and it'll be all right. You'll be fine. But practice is important. I know for some people this comes pretty fast, but some people will need to practice a lot, and that's okay. Practice does not make perfect, but it certainly makes permanent. And if you practice something well, that will make doing that thing well the norm. That will be the thing that is permanently ingrained in your mind. Just like if you practice doing something poorly, that will become the thing that is permanent. So, practice it well, and don't worry if you're having trouble. Ask people for help. There are plenty of people around. I'm certain in your own class who will have things figured out, and if you're not comfortable with that, then feel free to ask any of the D2s, any of the upperclassmen that you see. I know all of us are more than happy to help. Right now, I'm sort of just smoothing out the surface of the lingual fossa as well. It's not the most important thing at this juncture, but sometimes it can help as you're going along to just make sure that you're kind of keeping things a little consistent. And just making sure that you're doing the bits and pieces that need to come together that give you a sense of, okay, this is coming together. I can do this. No big deal. As you can see, I was looking at that just to see if the incisal edge was at a proper sort of both level and if it had the right shape. And I can see, I've gotten a little bit too far over here, and I may need to round this out just a teeny bit, not too much, because remember the mesial point angle here is a little bit sharper than the distal. It's a little, we like to think of it sort of as a 90-degree angle. You can see it's not a 90-degree angle, but it's more square. So I'm going to take just a little bit of wax and just dollop it right there. And you can see already that's looking much nicer. It's looking much nicer right there. And you can just take a little dollop at a time. Also, if you notice my hands right now, they are getting very close to the actual waxing tip. Be careful not to touch that. It is very hot, and it will burn you. Just a little public service announcement there. Yeah, don't touch the waxing tips. I made that mistake inadvertently several times in the first week or so of waxing. It was not fun. Would not recommend. So let's take a look again. That's looking pretty nice. You can see it's not perfectly straight, but we can take care of that. You can always take your half Hollenbeck a little bit and just gently kind of rub it over the inside of this edge there. I'm going to start taking it down. Maybe go a little bit more towards the mesial. You got a little bit too much there, wherever it might be. We're starting to look pretty good. That's looking more like what we're aiming for. Now, in order to take care of that sort of pointy little distal point angle, rather than scrape it off, I mean, you could scrape it off. I'm just going to take the small waxing tip and I'm just going to drag it, but not down onto the side. I'm going to drag it back onto the lingual surface, and specifically onto the area that's going to become our distal marginal ridge. Like that. That way, nice, rounded distal. Our mesial is a little bit sharper. And when we pop it back into dentiform, that is starting to look like a central incisor. Now that we've got the facial surface, more or less in a place where we want it, and we can look at it from the lingual view here. You can see that the distal point angle of the incisal edge is just a little bit lower than it probably should be. So what we may end up doing is we may end up adding a little bit more wax to the incisal edge as we progress. But right now, let's take a break from that and let's go back to the lingual surface, because the lingual surface is important too. So again, I'm going to stick with the small waxing tip. If you're comfortable with the large one, go for it. But I think for what we're going to be doing, the small waxing tip is better. So I'm going to grab a little dollop of wax. I'm going to just plop it right sort of here on the cingulum. Grab another one, and maybe another one, and I'm just going to start drawing them up to the incisal edge. Not quite to the incisal edge, but close to it. Just sort of rounding things out there. But if you can see what we're doing here, we are creating the marginal ridges, which are going to help give us that nice little spade shape, little shovel. And what I'm noticing is my tooth is actually wanting to come out here, which means that I don't have quite enough material in my interproximal contacts. I'm clearly not having enough contact on one surface, and I'm pretty sure that it's the mesial. Because sometimes the mesial likes to be tricky like that. So I'm just going to add a little bit of wax, and I'm going to drag some around. I'm going to paint it around. Just like that. Just like we did the first time. And it looks like there's a little lumpy bump there. And we can just drag that sort of up towards the incisal. Or down towards the gingiva. Just depends what you're feeling. And where the tooth needs it. So let's see. Did we add enough? No, we did not add nearly enough. If you look at that, in fact, we actually dragged a little bit away from the incisal edge, so there you go. Pop it out again. Add a little bit towards the incisal. That's looking a little better. Let's see. How are we doing? There we go. That's looking pretty nice. So now that we've got that dealt with for the time being, let's work on the mesial marginal ridge here. Now that we've got our distal marginal ridge taken care of, we're just going to do the same thing, but on the other side here. Just going to draw it up. If you need a little more wax, add a little more wax. It can always come off. There you can see it's starting to develop a similar shape here. Now that we've kind of got that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very gently make sure that my waxing tip doesn't have any more wax, because I don't want to add any more wax right now. What I want to do is I want to just gently tap my waxing tip along the sort of junction between the marginal ridge wax and where our lingual fossa is. And you can see that's created a little bit of a smoother surface. Now, before I do anything else on the lingual right now, as you're looking at it, there are always going to be things that bug you. And right now, the thing that's bugging me is the fact that the incisal edge is both a little shallow and it's angling down just a little too much. So I really want to deal with that right now. The way I'm going to deal with that is that I'm going to add some more wax. And importantly, I'm going to add it to the distal portion. And I'm going to drag towards the mesial because we want most of it to remain at the distal. And you'll just drag a little bit of it with you, and that'll help you start to alleviate the problem. You don't have to go all the way. That's starting to look better. We're almost there. Almost there. That's looking pretty nice. I'll take that. In fact, I might add just the very tiniest little amount of wax to that mesial point angle just to get a nice symmetrical little groove there. Look at that. So let's look at our tooth now. We've got pretty nice looking facial surface from the facial angle. Pretty nice lingual surface from the lingual. Although, now I'm going to do what I did not do earlier, which is add on a little projection of our cingulum, which is just this little guy right here. You see him right there. And you see him right there. Now once you got that, really, your lingual surface is doing pretty good. However, now I'm sensing that one of my proximal contacts is still a little bit light because I should not be able to take that out that easy. I'm pretty sure that it's the distal aspect. The mesial aspect is a very nice interproximal contact. So let's take care of that, shall we? I'm going to take just a little dollop of wax and put it right in the area where I would like my contact to be. And honestly, you can be a little bit heavy with the wax there, because when you put it in, it'll kind of bulge a little bit, but it'll show you exactly where the contact is, which is that nice little shiny area right there. So we can see the contact area is a little farther back. I'm actually going to add a little more wax to it because I was not satisfied with the tension that I was getting with the proximal tooth. I'm just doing a little habitual smoothing out here while I kind of wait for that to set. And let's pop that back in. And there we go. That's nice. So what you can do, once you can clearly see, all right, there's our contact. We're just gonna take it down a little bit. You can see that I'm carving on the facial surface right now, The reason I'm doing that is to help sort of demarcate and preserve where that line angle is. Because when I come in here on the distal surface and start taking things away, I don't want to take away too much to the point where, you know, it's hard to now distinguish what is what. So let's grab our nylon, wipe that down a little bit. Looking pretty shiny. Obviously we have not finished this up yet, but we've got a pretty nice looking maxillary incisor, even without really putting on many of the finishing touches, which we are going to do. So in order to finish up your lingual fossa here, one thing that I like to do is I like to take the PK Thomas tool, not the sharp end, but the blunted end. You could use the UW1 tool as well, but you can just take it and gently shape the intersection of the marginal ridge and the lingual fossa with it. Yeah, because I'm looking at this, I'm like, the distal marginal ridge feels a little bit thick, especially compared to the mesial. And I'm just looking at the proximal tooth and thinking, you know, how does this relate to those? And I feel like my mesial marginal ridge is looking pretty good. My distal marginal ridge was looking a little heavy. Not terrible, but just a little heavy. I'm actually going to move over to the UW one because it's a little bit thicker, a little bit rounder. I'm going to give that a little wipe down. You can see that there's some imperfection with the surface, but generally speaking, this actual anatomical features are looking pretty dang good. Let's look this way. This way. Let's look at it actually in the arch. As I'm looking at this, it seems to me that the cervical element has a pretty nice curvature that matches the adjacent tooth, but I'm a little heavy at the incisal edge. And one thing that I can do about that, it's not terrible, but I can take my half Hollenbeck again and just scrape along it a little bit. That'll just take down some of the surface. Heck, I mean, if there wasn't really very much to begin with, you could just take the nylon and just rub against it, because that will take wax with it. But on the back, what I'm going to do on the lingual aspect is I'm going to take my small waxer again, and I'm going to just gently rub it around. I'm going to just try to smooth out that whole sort of lingual fossa area. Don't want to disrupt my cingulum. You can see as it dries and hardens, it creates a very nice, smooth lingual fossa there. And it's a little cloudy looking. It's a little matte finish looking at the time. But as you go over it with the nylon, just very lightly, that'll shine it up very nicely. Now we'll come over to the facial aspect. You can see, for the most part, pretty good, but I do have a little bit of a groove in the facial surface you can see right there. You know, a lot of this is just looking at how the light lies on it, and that'll show you where the imperfections lie. So I'm just gonna fix that in the same fashion. I'm just gonna run the waxing tip over it, blend it in with all the surrounding wax, the surrounding structures. As it dries, just take your nylon, you can wrap it over your finger like that, and just kind of buff polish it. You can even take a little bit of soapy water to it, and that can help give it a nice shine. But that right there is not a bad looking maxillary central incisor. And it's a process. It takes time, but you'll get used to it. Yeah, never fear. There will be more complicated teeth to do, but you'll get more confident, you'll get more experienced. You'll figure out how you like to wax up teeth. And as I'm looking at this, now, just one thing to be aware of is that you can see that you have these sort of facial grooves on number 9. Now, in my class, they didn't actually have us make those on number 8, but what you can do, oh, I just noticed that there's a little groove up here too, so I'm gonna just fill that in. Let's fill that little groove in. But what you can do is you can take this end of your half Hollenbeck and you can just very gently rub it up and down on one side and then on the other side. Oh, I need to pop that out. And that can help you sort of achieve it. This isn't, you know, if you spend a little more time, you could get it to look really nice. But you know, that's the general idea. I don't know that they'll have you do that because they didn't have our class do it, at least for when we were graded. But if you feel like getting really exceptionally anatomically correct, you know, feel free to experiment and, you know, add those on, so long as you're clear with your instructors that they won't grade you down for doing so, because the grade sheet and the criteria on there, that is what you should follow when you have a waxing exam. Make sure that you're doing what is on there. You know, do what it says, not what you think it should say. Anyhow, that does it for this this installment of my waxing tips and tricks tutorial thingamajigger. If Dr. Newman would like me to do a couple more tutorials, either for the premolars, molars, things like that, I'm more than happy to do so. But otherwise, yeah, just as you're going, take your time, have some fun. Don't forget to ask for help when you need it. Again, there's lots and lots of people who are more than happy to lend their assistance and their wisdom. And yeah, other than that, enjoy your first summer here at the School of Dentistry. Anyways, ta-ta for now. Have fun.